So, Mimi and Papa Baldwin had cats in the barn?
Well, no, Grandma Baldwin loved cats, and she had cats, but the ones I remember the most, I don't remember any of her cats, were on Aunt Hollis's farm, and they had a barn, and with lots of barn cats, and they were kind of wild. They didn't, they knew people provided some food once in a while, but they didn't really come up and weren't friendly. And, but I liked cats, and so I went out in the barn to see if I could find a cat. And
How old were you?
I was 10 maybe at that time. And I saw in this one hay room where they had bales of hay stacked, and they'd used some at one end of it, so it was down to the floor. And I saw some baby kittens, little tiny kittens playing. And so I crawled in there real carefully, and most of them just scurried into this hole in the floor. But one was kind of slow, and he didn't make it in there. And I got him, and he was all upset and everything. But I just kind of played with him and everything, and he relaxed and wasn't all upset anymore. And we just kind of sat there and looked at each other, and I held him and played with him, and he curled up and went to sleep. And so I laid down beside him and put my arm around him. He was right in the crook of my elbow, and I fell asleep. And I was gone for a while, and so they began to wonder where I was. And Phil said that I had gone into the barn, so and I was asleep in there with a cat. So Dad took his camera and walked down to the barn and looked in the window, and there, sure enough, I was on the floor with my arm around this kitten. We were both sound asleep, so he took a picture.
Did you keep the cat?
No, I couldn't keep the cat. He said it had to stay there. It was too young to leave the mother at that point. But I did have a cat. I had a pet cat, Puff. Dad, a stray cat, little kitten, showed up at school when I was about 4 or 5. I think it was before Phil was born. So I must have been 3 or 4. And it was a cold day, and he had on his overcoat, and this kitten came around, and they didn't know what to do with it. So he decided to bring it home, and he put it in his coat pocket. It fit down in his overcoat pocket. And he came in the house and said, Mom called and said Daddy had something for me. So I ran in, what do you have, what do you have? And he reached in his pocket and he pulled out this little orange kitten, and he held it in his hand, you know. And that was my kitten, Puff. And Puff lived to be 3 years old on Market Street in Lima, Ohio, which was a busy street. And, you know, he was an indoor-outdoor cat. So that was a long time to live.
He used up his 9 lives in 3 years.
In 3 years.
And why was Papa at school?
Papa was a principal. And in fact, at that time, he was a teaching principal, which meant that he taught half of the day, and then they had another teacher come in for the other half so that he could do the principal duties and attend meetings and whatnot. And he was at an elementary school in Lima.
Do you know which school?
He was at Irving at that time, the original Irving School. And then he helped build the new Irving School in the 1950s, kind of the early to mid-1950s. He worked in the summertime. Teachers and principals were not paid during the summer. You taught 9 months and you were paid 9 months. And so you had to find something else to do in the summertime so that you could make it through. And he hired on as a construction worker on the school that he was going to be principal in.
And Mimi was a teacher also?
She was a teacher. She had taught 2 years when she married. And back in those days, if you married, you weren't allowed to teach anymore. So that didn't bother her. She stopped teaching, and she wasn't that crazy about it at the time anyway. So she was home for a long time. I was in 3rd grade when she went back to substitute teaching. And then when I was in 6th grade, they decided to start having public kindergarten in the public schools. And she wanted to be one of the new kindergarten teachers, and she was. And so Mom was a teacher, and Dad was a principal. By that time, the principal jobs were big enough that they were principals all day and didn't have to teach half of the day.